Ladies and gentlemen, after a day on which blizzards have swept most of Britain, This Is Your Life is waiting to meet a hero of the sea, a hero of seas like this. A man who has spent his life challenging and triumphing over such seas and who is the only living holder of 2 Lifeboat Institute gold medals for bravery. He's on his way here now for a meeting to organize a film premiere in aid of lifeboat funds. We've disguised the entrance here to make it appear that this is where his committee meeting is. But as you can imagine, when he walks in here, we're going to ask him to postpone that meeting. Good evening, ladies. Thank you, Commander Hardy. Whoa! Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you have not met before. Richard Evans, BEM. Tonight, This Is Your Life, not your committee meeting. Come up here. Well, he said we've beaten him tonight. Richard Evans, your whole life, well, you get your breath back, let me tell you, has been bound up with a tiny Welsh village, Moelfre in Anglesey, that most of us have barely heard of. You were born there 65 years ago, then grew up with the sea and the ships on your doorstep. Your father was a sea captain, and you were brought up in that house, Bayview. And the lifeboat station was only a few hundred yards away. Then, as now, the warning maroon would shoot into the sky, and as a child, you would see your grandfather and your uncle answer that call. Now, this is a livelier committee meeting than you were expecting, but during your 16 years as coxswain of the Moelfre lifeboat, you and your crew have saved 307 lives at sea. Your old crew would love to be here with you tonight to share this evening, but of course they cannot, as you well know, especially on a night or weather like tonight. The call might come at any time. But in fact, we have a surprise for you, because if you watch that screen, up there at Moelfre, 300 miles away, a live outside broadcast is there so that your crew can greet you. Hello, boys, getting to London.
Hello.
Now, the new Cox, Murray Francis, you're the new Cox.
Hello, Eamon. Hello, Dick. I bet you wish we were rescuing you from that night.
Evan Jones, you're one of the younger members of his crew. You're a carpenter in the village.
That's right. Hello, Eamon. Hello, Dick. It's a very proud moment for me as a new face aboard this boat to have been having this opportunity in sharing this momentous time with Dick here in another page in his own personal history. And I'd like to just congratulate him very much and wish him a happy evening.
Thank you, William. Davis, electrician.
Hello, Eamon. Hello, Dick. After 32 years of serving you on the lifeboat, I hope you can keep it calm and collected there tonight as what you have always done while you were on the lifeboat. All the best, Dick.
Well, you should have heard what he said when I threw the book at him. But, I want to have a quick word with Murray Francis in particular. To continue this story, I want to ask you to take your mind back to the night of December the 2nd, 1966.
When we rescued the crew, the great vessel.
That was the night, in fact, he won his
Gold medal.
His second gold medal. Indeed. Now the ship was the support. Another member of your crew besides him that night, who was with you on that dramatic rescue, serving with you as an able seaman, although he is a former captain of the luxury liner, the Empress of Canada. Come in, Captain David Jevons.
More people see you, believe me. Amazing.
Thus, there we are. That's all right, Dick, beside us there. But now, first of all, Captain, I want you to tell me, what's the captain of a luxury liner doing as an AB seaman in a lifeboat?
Well, after many years of association with Moira, I think it only natural for professional seamen to volunteer to be a member of a lifeboat, especially with Dick as coxswain.
Very different from being on the bridge of a liner.
Somewhat closer to the water, yes, indeed. Yes. Yes.
Captain, was there ever a moment during the rescue we've just talked about when you thought it wouldn't make it?
There were several times. In fact, I expressed his opinion to Dick himself.
And what did he say?
Well, he was saw fit to disagree at the time, stuck to his wheel and went in just the same, successfully as you know. But what I think is even more remarkable is the fact that out of a crew of 8, I was the only non-Welsh-speaking member, and even at the most extreme moments of stress, at no time was any language other than English used. I think this is quite remarkable.
This was great thinking. How old was Dick at this stage?
At that stage of the game, Dick would have been... Dick, they know now about you. Dick would have been 63 then. But despite this fact, he stayed an open wheel, mark you, an open wheel in winds of over 100 miles an hour and with temperatures in the low 30s. I think it quite remarkable.
How long did he stay at that wheel?
13 hours, plus. Dick, it has been my privilege to say around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Devon. Now, for that feat, Richard Evans was awarded the highest honour the Royal National Lifeboat Institute can give, the gold medal. And Dick, you brought the crew of the Mephistophilus safely to shore, but the captain and 3 others refused to abandon the ship. As you pulled away, did you think they had chances of survival?
At the time, no. I think I was begging them to come to leave the ship in Welsh, and I think they were answering me in Greek that they wouldn't.
Well, in fact, the winds changed and they were towed to safety. But the man who put out the Mayday signal that morning has never forgotten just what his crew owes to you. And he's flown from Greece tonight to be with you, the captain of the Mephistophilus, Captain Angelos Katsoufis. Well, I know, Captain, that when we rang this man in Athens, he dropped everything to be here tonight.
Yes, I want to thank you once more for your assistance on this day. My crew, it's impossible, to be this night here, so I want to thank you on behalf of them once more.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Captain Katsoufis. Thank you. Well, Richard, these are days on in your life, but you were in fact first putting to sea when you were a child of only 8.
Oh, yes, that's how we got our Woodbine money.
Your childhood friend and former skipper, Captain Tom Hughes. Tell us, how did you and Richard, get money from at the age of 8?
Oh, sir, we were always on the lookout. Always on the lookout for the lifeboat to go out on a day when it was impossible for her to put back to the slip. And our fond hope was that she would go on the buoy, call for us boys to take the crew and any survivors that were there onto the sheltered beach. And then, for 2pence, we'd get 5 woodbines.
Shipwrecks were an accepted part of village life, but I believe that there was, even some signs of good fortune at times.
Oh, in the early 20s, we had one of them, there's no doubt. We had one, a vessel came ashore. Fortunately, she came ashore quite close to the lifeboat station, and the crew were able to walk ashore. And believe me, that was the grand bonus for the village.
How was that?
It took us a little time to find out that the authorities, as usual, are rather slow-moving, and we moved in one night to find ourselves a huge cargo of coal.
Coal. So you kept warm that winter.
Not only that winter, I do believe, sir, but for several winters following that.
Thank you, Captain Hughes. Well, now, at 14, Dick, you leave school and you go to sea. Go to sea on a coaster, I think. But every time you're home, you're there if you're needed on the lifeboat. You also buy a motorbike, which you and another man have cause to remember or perhaps forget?
I was lucky. I landed in a cornfield.
Yes, your oldest friend and cousin, Hugh Owens.
Hugh!
Yes, it's you. Well, Hugh, we're going to ask you about that cornfield in a moment. Tell us, what was Dick like in his motorcycling days?
Oh, he was a fine-looking man in them days, with a mop of curly hair. And a real lady killer he was. He bought this motorbike when he was on leave, and I used to go pillion riding with him. We were coming home from Bangor from a football match. Dick was forced off the road by a bus, and I was lucky. I was thrown clear over Dick's head and I landed in a cornfield. But Dick wasn't so lucky. He came to in a doctor's surgery in Menai Bridge. And when I saw that doctor picking up his scissors, starting to cut these golden curls, I felt sorry for Dick. But Dick, he was wild. And I don't think them curls grew the same after that.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Well, now, Richard Evans stays at sea until he's 25, when his uncle John Matthews, the village butcher, becomes full-time coxswain of the Mofra lifeboat, and Richard comes home from the sea to take over the butcher's shop.
But he was so shy, he made me do all the serving.
Well, you certainly know that voice, of course, the girl who was with you in the shop. Yes, your sister, Mrs. Kitty Roberts. Come in, Kitty. Kitty, I can't imagine a man who's faced all those dangers at sea being shy in the butcher's shop.
Oh, he was shy, all right, Eamon. After being a big sailor, you see, he pushed me in front to serve the customers. He was too shy to do himself after being a sailor.
But even as a butcher, he served with the lifeboat.
He did, certainly, yes. And every time that he went on his rounds, and he had a round on a Wednesday, Fridays and Saturdays. And the last thing he told me, remember, if a call for the lifeboat comes, that you're to send for me. Ring up Marion Glass Post Office, ring up Bryn Take Post Office, and ring up Tinnagungle Post Office. There weren't many private phones at the time, you see, Eamon, but I was lucky on my side. My uncle, who was the coxswain at the time, he had the phone. But never mind the shyness, Eamon. He's been a wonderful brother to me.
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you. I know that. Anyhow, you settle down and you enjoy the life of the village butcher. But then in 1931, you meet at Llangefni Market a girl. You know who the girl was, I don't. You better remember, yes. Because in 1933, you're married. For 37 years, she has shared with you the triumphs and tragedies of the lifeboat service. Come in, Mrs. Nancy Evans. You sit on his right hand there. Well, now, Mrs. Evans, when you married Dick, did you realize what being married to a lifeboat man really meant? But as far as you were concerned, as you told me today, it was just another job, isn't that
that's right, yes.
And throughout those years, on the long, lonely vigils that you must have spent listening to the radio for news of the lifeboat, did you ever regret the life that you'd chosen?
No, never. I didn't regret nothing at all.
And I know that in the 16 years that Dix was coxswain, that neither of you ever took a holiday. In fact, one of you always had to be near the telephone 24 hours a day in case a call came. And when it did in the middle of the night, you used to go out knocking at the doors. But what about one call that came on a Sunday morning?
Well, I had to rush down to the chapel and get the crew out in the middle of the service because the call.
And out you went. Now, in 1954, your uncle retires and you're invited to succeed him as coxswain of the Mofra lifeboat. Now, to do this, you give up your prosperous butcher's business. Can you remember what your wage was at that time?
When I started in the...
And the full-time cox, having given up the business, how much were you paid?
I think somewhere around £6 a week.
It was £5 a week. They are exaggerating. Tell me, why did you take on a job like this for as little as that?
First of all, because the Inland Revenue were taking a keen interest in my business and were taking the best part. And I decided I had to do something. I was working solely for the government. and the lifeboat was in my blood. I wanted to go out in the lifeboat every time it went out.
It was very much a tradition in your family, and I know
Yes.
that was you're anxious to keep that up as well. Can you, in fact, remember the first life that you saved?
I can. Dick didn't want to turn out even though there was a lady in distress.
Yes, I'll explain. That's the man who's been with you on nearly every one of your rescues, mechanic of the Moultrie lifeboat, Evan Owens. Evan, tell us about this lady who was in distress.
Actually, it was a pregnant cow. Dick and I were in the boathouse one day. A phone call came from the farmer. There was a cow had fallen over a cliff just southwest of Point Linus, Dick. Dick tried to contact the Hon. Secretary because he wanted to know how to go about it. Nobody knew. The secretary wasn't home. So the RSPCA said, go out. We went out. We actually towed this cow from the beach, where it was in danger of drowning, 1.5 miles round the rocks, Dick, and to Dillis Beach and ashore.
You got her ashore.
We got her ashore.
Did she have her calf safely?
She did, Eamon. And in a few weeks' time, I think that calf won first prize.
At Smithfield. Thank you very much, Evan.
Smithfield.
Well done. Thank you. Well, now, by becoming a coxswain, Richard Evans maintains a family tradition of lifeboat service, as I've told you, which started with his grandfather. Now, though he's since retired, of course, that tradition has been kept alive by your 3 sons. Come in, David, William, and Derek. Well, David, of course, you live in Holyhead now, but you still keep very much in touch with the Moultrie lifeboat, don't you?
Yes, I do, Raymond. As you said, I live in Holyhead now, but many a time I've gone down just by chance to visit my parents. And practically every time I've gone down to Moultrie, the phone's rang. 5 minutes later, Dad and me are in the car going down to the boathouse, launching the lifeboat. Last summer, for instance, we went out with the inshore rescue boat 5 times, and that was from 2:30 in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. 12 persons were saved that afternoon, and of them 12, 7 were children, and the eldest age would have been 7.
Terrific, terrific. So you didn't have time for much tea, I can say.
No cup of tea that day.
And I believe, Derek, that your father was quite a disciplinarian when you fellows were younger.
He was indeed him, and his pet hate was to have long hair. He was always on us to get her haircuts. I think he was a bit jealous because he'd lost his girls.
This was even though you're a policeman as well.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
But although he's a great lifeboatman, as we're telling, I gather he's also a bit of a fisherman.
Yes, a bit of a fisherman. He does quite a lot of lobster fishing in the summer, and I go out with him every chance I get. Well, we've been out for a fortnight. We hadn't caught a thing at all. And on this particular day we went out, we picked up 19 pots, and we hadn't caught a lobster at all. And in the last pot we picked up, there was a huge lobster in the bottom. And in his anxiety to get the lobster out, he put his hand in and the lobster grabbed him in the left hand. Well, I got up from the back of the boat with the intention of breaking the claw off. But because you can get a better price for a lobster with 2 claws than 1, you won't... So all he did was he bit on the pipe which he had in his mouth at the time, and after about 5 minutes, the lobster eventually surrendered. And we went ashore that morning with 1 large lobster, 1 badly gashed left hand, and 1 badly dented pipe, which I still have here now.
You can see the dent from here, yes. I think, William, you can vouch for the fact that he really loves that pipe, too.
Oh, he really loves that pipe, yes. So there's one occasion in particular that I can remember. It was in 1958, I think. We'd been painting our small boat on the lifeboat slipway, and we thought we'd do a spot of fishing. We launched the boat out, and it was a little bit too rough really to go out, but Dad would insist on going. Out we went, and quite a big sea came and filled the boat and capsized it. Now, we're both in the water, Father managed to kick his Wellington boots off, but his pipe stayed in his mouth during the time he was in the water. And he was bobbing up and down there in the water with a pipe in his mouth. And even when I was pulling him out on the slipway, he still had that pipe in his mouth.
Well, I know, William, that no matter how much he loves his pipe, he certainly loves his family, right?
Yes, indeed. Two young ladies would very much like to be here today, but unfortunately, because they're a bit young, they can't appear, of course.
Yes, indeed. They are, in fact, your own two daughters,
They are,
isn't that
yes.
right? Who speak only Welsh. Well, Dick, in fact, from your own home, they're going to speak to you now. That's Arian and Rian, who's 8 months, Arian age 3. You watch that screen there.
Hello, Dave.
What's it like, Linda?
It's like Linton.
Can we do the present to me?
Can we do the present to me?
Did I see him by time and grab it, innit? He's so back there.
Good to back, Mama. What do you mean?
Somebody will have to tell us what they were saying in Welsh. What were they saying?
Hello, Dad. How are you enjoying yourself in London? And then this one asked me to bring her a present.
She's probably looking for a lobster with 2 claws. Well, how are you enjoying yourself in London?
Very much indeed.
Good man.
Everybody's very kind to me, but I'm itching to get back to Anglesey.
Well, you'll be back soon, and your service to lifeboats will be long remembered by men of the sea everywhere. But there's one story yet we haven't told. It is the morning of October the 27th, 1959. The motor vessel Hindley is seeking shelter in Molfra Bay. Suddenly the wind changes and she finds herself being blown across the rocks on the shore. At noon, she sends out a distress call. Your usual boat is out of commission and you haven't got a full crew. But with time running out for the Hindley, you must put to sea. And that's how, down there in Molfra, I think you first came to make your first trip, Hugh Jones. Is that right?
Yes, I was working in Oldgate with Cohen at the time. They came up and asked him to go into the boathouse. I offered to go with him, and he, of course, accepted it.
How did you feel that time?
Well, when I got down to the boathouse, looked at the sea, it was terrific. But Dick was so calm, cool, and I was watching it all the time, and he gave me great courage. And it was when we got back to the slip, saw the Hindley on the rocks, I realized what a narrow thing it had been.
Now, indeed, winds of over 100 miles per hour, colossal waves driving the ship onto the rocks, and Dick Evans takes his lifeboat alongside 10 times to take off the crew. Before the lifeboat could even reach the shore with the rescue men, the Hindley was on the rocks and breaking in two. No gold medal was ever more deserved. All 8 members of that crew, of course, were saved. Today, these men are scattered in ships all over the world. But some of them, 3 of them, have found time to greet you. One should be in a coaster off Newcastle, another in Las Palmas with the Union Line, another at home in Liverpool. Come in, Colin Stocks, William Maguire, and Captain Chipcase.
Thank you very much.
Captain Chipcase, tell me, how would you describe that rescue?
Well, I would say one of the greatest feats of seamanship that ever I've seen. He not only did this once, but 10 times alongside of that ship to fetch the crew off. And I'd consider himself and his crew the bravest men I've ever come across.
Well, it seems to me that the whole village of Molfra thinks that same thing. What you don't know now, finally, Dick, is that the villagers want to pay you a final, particular tribute that you will appreciate tonight by singing in Welsh your favourite hymn. And they'll be singing from Molfra because tonight, Richard Evans, BEM, this is your life. now, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing when you got a big, tough man like him. He was shy on the shop and he was shy here, but what a great pleasure for us to be able to pay a tribute to a man who has done so much and never blown his pipe about it anywhere. I hope you enjoyed it. All of them are great, warm people, and our thanks to Commander Harvey and to the Lifeboat Institute for helping us bring this surprise. I know that you've